Production funding for Arts Upload has been provided in part by Francis Family Foundation, Hall Family Foundation, the H&R Block Foundation, Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John W. and FEE Spies Memorial Trust, Muriel McBrien Kaufman Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Randy Mason.
And I'm Maris Aylward.
It's another Arts Upload, and as promised, we're going to have a whole lot of Benton.
And some Bond, a new play by actor-writer Logan Black.
Another favorite fountain and a favorite son.
It's all ahead on The Upload.
Thomas Hart Benton's artistic reputation certainly had its share of peaks and valleys.
After all, he was painting recognizable figures when the rest of the art world had turned to abstraction.
He brought history and politics to his paintings and murals and was never shy about letting his opinion be known.
Thanks to a new exhibition called Hollywood at the Nelson Atkins Museum, viewers are getting a new way to look at the artist who called Kansas City home for 40 years.
We'll take you out to see it and look in on some local folks with Benton stories of their own.
Those are the drawings of Barnett from the dancer from the twist. And then we have many lithos upstairs. And then we have a self-portrait of Benton, very much in his later life. This is obviously a study. You can see he puts the color in, but he doesn't, draw the faces in. Then this little study right here is, the study of the beautiful painting that's at the River Club. Oh, here's another tiny one I'll show you. Doesn't that look like some of the part of the tree like he did with Persephone when he was peeking around at her? He was really not known for his still lifes, and I don't think even today they command the recognition. But I love the colors. I love the depth of the green. So he's with us a lot.
Because the artist lived here so long, it's not unusual for Kansas Cityans to have a Benton or two on their walls. Not so many, however, can say they're in a painting, the way Barnett Helzberg, his brother Charlie, and some of their friends were.
I was cooking chili most Sunday nights, so we invited Tom and Rita to the chili parties. And one night he said, well, I'm going to paint this group, which I don't think I really believed. What I learned was the incredible amount of work he would put into a production. I think he was happy with it, although he told me, he says, as many hands as I've done, I still have trouble with hands.
The twist, as it came to be called, didn't end up in Barnett's hands. Don't ask, he says. But the two did stay in touch. And in 1967, Helzberg took his bride-to-be to Tom and Rita's for dinner and what turned out to be some memorable bourbon-soaked premarital advice.
It was quite colorful.
But the story isn't quite finished yet.
Barnett would make his chili, and we would go over to visit and drop off a container of chili. And they were wedding present casseroles, and she always wanted to keep them. So after a couple of times, I learned to take the chili in plastic bowls.
Just like Hollywood directors and casting agents, Benton would scout for just the right talent for his pictures.
Stephanie Knapp, the Nelson's curator for this exhibition, has been hearing lots of Benton stories lately. From bravery in the face of angry dogs to casual nudity on the beach at Martha's Vineyard. But this is a show with a focus, and it's all about the movies.
Between about 1913 and 1917, Benton is in New York, and he is painting for silent movie sets. And he also had a little bit part at one point. He's painting character portraits, and it's then that I think he's really seeing how the power of the motion picture industry and the influence of the motion picture industry is on the ascendancy. And he's seeing the kind of stories that are being told, and he's probably wondering, if all of these stories can be told on the silver screen, why not on canvas as well? But it was in 1937 in August that Benton first went to Hollywood, California. A commission from Life magazine took him there. They were interested in the way that a big budget film was made, so they thought that Benton, as a great American storyteller, could capture that for their readers.
But Benton's fascination with the regular folks who worked so hard to make the magic failed to impress, and the hundreds of pencil drawings and pen and ink sketches he produced never made it to the pages of the magazine. Some of them are on display here, along with paintings from 1942 he made to aid the war effort, and numerous examples of his showman's knack for staying in the public eye despite being based in the heartland.
Even though he's in Kansas City, he is still traveling as he always did, whether it be to Hollywood, whether it's in Oklahoma, Arkansas, whether it's in Canada. He's a Kansas City fixture, but he's also, very much interested in what's happening in all corners of this country.
Benton's murals, like these at the Capitol in Jefferson City, helped make him famous. His hand-picked scenes from Missouri history practically leap from the walls with a cinematic flurry. Likewise, this dramatic grouping of panels from the American historical epic he painted in the 1920s breathes new life into some familiar images which haven't been seen this way before.
We've installed it in a panoramic sweep of 60 linear feet, wanting to create the impression that visitors are seated in a theater, and boom, you have all of America's history spelled out, scene by scene by scene, in kind of this dizzying montage in the exhibition. And it's a very different way, for our visitors at least, to experience the American historical epic.
During the decade he worked on this series, Benton's techniques evolved. In fact, his multimedia approach is a connecting thread that runs through the exhibition.
Contemporary filmmakers had been urged by Vaughall Lindsay to create through the use of maquettes. So Benton's process is, in a way, very similar to that, moving from complicated sketches to maquettes to the final take, so almost pre-production storyboard phases to final take. And there's a great way to see that in the exhibition in Benton's final Hollywood commission.
That would be his poster for the 1954 not-so-epic motion picture, The Kentuckian. Once again, Benton worked his way through various stages to reach the final product.
What's interesting is that Lancaster shot his film in CinemaScope, so very long, horizontal format. Benton wisely depicts his Kentuckian in a very vertical format, this towering man of the frontier. I think you see this great contrast in the exhibition between very close-up portraits of Americans, caricatures, stereotypes, archetypes, but then when you get to Benton's attention to the West, that is just as much of a character in his paintings as any of the actual people that you might see.
The exhibition debuted earlier this year at the Peabody Essex in Massachusetts and makes its way next year to stops in Fort Worth and Milwaukee. As the largest public holder of works by Benton, the Nelson Atkins is well aware of the extra care his paintings sometimes require. That's why, in addition to providing some of the show's most iconic images, they're also sending along painting conservator Mary Schaefer to make sure the efforts of this prolific, often controversial artist will be seen in the best possible light.
Benton is really a remarkable American artist for his tenacity and staying power, and I think that just speaks to something very important in his art, that we can't just let him go.
Thomas Hart Benton Hollywood runs at the Nelson through January 3rd.
We talked about the Fringe Festival earlier this year, and among the hits that emerged from it were an original play about Peter Pan and Mark Twain, one about men's body parts, and another about a soldier and his dog.
That last one, Bond, was restaged this fall at the Fish Tank. Producer Ashley Holcroft got to spend some offstage time with actor-playwright Logan Black and Diego.
Diego! The same dream again.
Based on his 2006 tour of duty in Iraq, Bond chronicles the relationship between Logan Black and his bomb-detecting partner Diego. It all started in 1996, when fresh out of high school, Logan joined the Utah National Guard. In 2004, in deference to 9/11, Logan suspended his undergrad studies and went active duty with the Army. But there was just one problem.
The job I had there wasn't available in the military, so they said, we're going to reclassify you and make you a combat engineer. So primarily dealing with landmines and explosives and that sort of thing. It's a terrifying job. I found out about a new dog program that the DoD was doing in conjunction with the British Army. So I called the enlisted personnel branch at the Pentagon and say, there's a dog school, right, for engineers? And they said, yeah. And I said, I want to volunteer. And 2 weeks later, I came down on orders.
I first met Diego in 2005 as part of the Specialized Search Dog Course in Fort Leonard Wood, a few hours south of here. These guys had over 40 years of explosive detection work, and they were geniuses. Right, lads. Welcome to the Specialized Search Dog Course. Over the next 14 weeks, you and your sons will learn to detect over 40 individual explosive odors. IEDs, improvised explosive devices, have become the most lethal weapon insurgents are using against coalition forces, and they're damn good at it.
As destiny would have it, out of the 24 possible dogs, Logan was paired with that keen yellow lab.
We clicked instantly, and he was smart. So smart. He would cheat. About halfway through, Diego started finding devices faster than any other dog. And I don't mean running a 40-minute problem in 20 minutes. I mean, he would almost run right to the bomb. After a few days of this, Ron realized that Diego was tracking his scent to where he was placing the bomb. We had to start changing up who set our problems so that Diego would just search. Oh, he was the perfect mixture of play drive, curiosity, and intelligence. And his nose.
Logan and Diego were partners for over a year, making incredible finds. Together, they discovered caches of over 250,000 pounds of weapons, explosives, IEDs, and ammunition. Because of the specialized task they performed, the pair weren't part of a specific unit, instead being assigned to missions with everyone from the SEALs to the Iraqi police. But this constant shifting bore with it a deep sense of isolation.
It was just me and Diego. I'd do a mission, we'd come home, I'd go back to my trailer, get ready for the next mission. I was left on my own to process all the emotions that were happening.
No! Diego! This way! Come! Come here! No. You're okay. Moving on to conduct a rapid search. Every fiber in my body is telling me that this is a car bomb. Come on, buddy. What's this?
So I know without him, had I been alone in those situations, or had I even been with a dog that we didn't have a personal connection on top of the professional working connection, I don't know how I would have come out of it. He absolutely kept me healthy.
When their time together came to a close, Diego was transferred to another handler, and Logan came to Kansas City to pursue an MFA in acting and directing at UMKC, all the while trying in vain to monitor his partner's retirement eligibility. They would be apart for 7 long years before being reunited in 2012 after Logan mounted a social media campaign to find his beloved boy.
It's been fantastic. I picked him up 3 years ago now and brought him back home. He still wants to work. All of his training is still second nature. When he goes into a new space, he always does a left to right cursory check of the room, looks at everything, smells everything, then says, okay, Dad, it's good. Now I'm just gonna lay down and somebody better come pet me. So he's living a pretty wonderful life of retirement.
But we may have never heard about their adventures if this past March, while performing in the Heart of America Shakespeare Festival's Merchant of Venice, Logan hadn't posed a question to fellow actor Robert Gibby Brand.
I said, hey, what one-man shows would be good for Fringe that are 60 minutes? And he said, oh, that's easy, yours. And so that kind of planted the seed. It took me probably about 3 months to do the initial script and then a month to do the rewrites. And it was very much a double-edged sword. I spent a lot of time doing research, and sometimes that would trigger my PTSD. And I would find that I had just gone down that rabbit hole. Other times it was very cathartic to look at a traumatic event. And now that I have perspective and distance from it, and break it down and go, why did I act the way I did? I worked very hard to never take a stance whether the war was good, whether it was right, whether we were lied to or we not. That's not what the story's about. It's just about my interaction with a dog.
And it's an interaction that has deeply resonated with audiences, a fact that surprised Logan on his first playwriting effort.
It's the type of theater I think all artists want to do. We want to affect a change in our audience's minds. And suddenly I was seeing that happen right in front of me.
And then I saw him. Diego, come! Come here, buddy!
The show ends, everyone claps, and Diego is swarmed with people to pet him, and I'm swarmed with people that are shaking my hand and hugging me and crying. I had one veteran pull me to the side. He fought in Vietnam, and he told me that if somebody from his generation had been able to tell their story in this way, he wouldn't have spent 30 years wandering in darkness. So when I have a vet tell me something like that, I have to continue telling this story. I think vets telling their stories would be a game changer. So I hope the show inspires, if it inspires one vet to write a poem, then all my productions have succeeded.
Good boy. We like to say this is the city of fountains, right?
Yes, we do, and we figure that means people around here often have favorites of their own for one reason or another.
People like Devin Carney, artistic director of the Kansas City Ballet. We have been seeing a lot of Devin lately as they get ready for their new Nutcracker.
This week, Devin talks water, not choreography, with producer Dave Burkhart on another edition of My Favorite Fountain.
I really like this fountain, and you know, it's here at the corner of Pershing and Grand with Union Station on one side, with the World War I Museum on the other side, and just beyond that, where I work at Kansas City Ballet Studio. How much more could you ask for to have a beautiful fountain like this right in this area? Love it. Well, the reason I find this to be my favorite fountain is because I come from the East Coast, and I've been around water most of my life, but for the last 2 years here in Kansas City, you know, it's pretty waterless in terms of actual bodies of water. But what's awesome is that there's so many fountains around the city, which really attracted me here. This particular fountain, the Block Fountain, is the one I drive by, to, and from work every day. So in the morning, when I look at this fountain, I'm looking at the fountain and at the World War I Museum right behind it. And then in the evening, as I'm going home, there's Union Station behind the fountain. And so there's this sense of continuity in my life, which I really love about being around this fountain every day. The choreography of this fountain is quite spectacular, frankly. And it actually, for me, even dances on a daily basis, which just makes my day. The water is not all the same, as you can see, so it's definitely got patterns in terms of its heights. And, you know, I'm doing a lot of core work in my work, which requires an awful lot of patterns, and it always kind of helps me to see a fountain that's not all the same, and it reminds me that it's okay to have different heights and different widths in the core work that I'm creating. Yeah, I really miss this fountain during the winter time when it's turned off. I really sense this loss, if you want to call it, of the water in my life. I just enjoy it so much every single day. I like this fountain on a beautiful day. Yeah.
Arts Upload continues from the Thomas Hart Benton State Historic Site at 3616 Bellevue, right off the traffic way.
You know, earlier in the show, the Hellsbergs talked about having dinner out here with Tom Benton and his wife, Rita. Both of them died in early 1975, but the way the house and the studio are set up, you almost think they might come back at any minute.
Some great memorabilia, sketches, 14 original artworks that visitors can see when they come to take the tour. It's open throughout the week except Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Okay, for our final story this week, we've got another internationally known artist with lots of ties to this area.
Gordon Parks from Fort Scott, Kansas. Over 65 years ago, the great photographer set out to do a series about segregation for Life magazine.
But the series never made it to print. Recently, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston dug into the archives so that today we can finally see the images and stories Parks had captured.
It's always just been called young African-American couple in front of segregated movie theater. Didn't have a firm date. We didn't know anything about it.
This was the picture that launched the Museum of Fine Arts' Karen Haas on a curatorial quest to learn what brought photographer Gordon Parks back to Fort Scott, Kansas, his hometown, in 1950. What she uncovered was a trove, a comprehensive look at Black life under segregation.
He had the power to go back and tell the stories of African-American families, these friends of his, people who trusted him, who would look right into his camera and, really believed that he would do right by them.
This exhibition comprises the photographs Parks took on assignment for Life magazine. He had pitched the story, to return home to Kansas for an extremely personal take on segregation.
He decides to go back and seek out his classmates from elementary school, and it turns out it was the entire class of 1927 that he was looking for, so all the 11 classmates, and to look at where their lives had gone and what their experiences had been in the 20-plus years since he'd seen them.
It wasn't easy for Parks to return home. Kansas and Fort Scott had been rife with racism throughout his hardscrabble childhood.
He was the youngest of 15 children. His father was a tenant farmer, his mother was a maid. He described his life as having been discriminated against and really felt a need to get away.
As he tracked down his classmates some 20 years after he'd last seen them, he found that nearly all had moved away, some to Chicago's South Side.
He found one friend, Maisel, who was in very dire straits, and he described her as the class tragedy. She was living with an abusive husband who actually held up Gordon Parks with a gun and took all his money.
She was the exception. By and large, Parks found his classmates, like himself, had improved their lives.
Another one of the classmates had found a very good job at Campbell's Soup, which apparently was a factory that hired a lot of African-American workers. So some people were living very middle-class lives, but nearly all of the families that he met with were living in mostly African-American neighborhoods.
Haas retraced Parks' trip last year. Like Parks, her intent was personal too, and tinged with sadness for the homes no longer standing.
What had compelled you to go there?
I'm not sure, except to say that I really have become obsessed with this story. I feel as though these are people I've come to know through reading Gordon Parks's notes, reading his notebooks, going through his correspondence, looking through the contact sheets, studying the images. I'm really fascinated by these people's lives. I'm realizing in the process of this research how little I know of this moment in history.
And were it not for Haas, we wouldn't have seen this history. Life magazine never published the Parks story. Haas speculates it was bumped for breaking news, and by the time it could be published, the subjects' lives had already changed dramatically. So here, 65 years later, Parks' perspective finally sees the light of day.
One very exciting thing is that we've recently reproduced one of the images from the exhibition of a little girl playing the piano with her mother sitting next to her. And just out of the blue have been contacted by this little girl who turns out to be now in her late 60s, living in Arizona. In many ways, her life was exactly what her mother had hoped for her, and she went on to do many of the things her mother had not been able to do in her own life.
Progress through the lens of Gordon Parks.
Speaking of Gordon Parks, you might recall the elementary school in Midtown Kansas City named after him was at the center of some controversy a few years back, whether the state should actually close it down.
Kevin Wilmot, the filmmaker from Lawrence, has been working on a documentary about the school and the kinds of issues they face. It will air on KCPT at 8 p.m. on November 12th.
But before then, we'll have time for one more Arts Upload with more on resetting the Nutcracker and another man who helps make murals.
From here at the Thomas Hart Benton home, I'm Maris Aylward.
And I'm Randy Mason. Thanks for watching.
We'd go out to the orchard right next to my trailer, and he would run and run with reckless abandon. He still had a lot of puppy energy left at just over a year old. This was our habit, our morning ritual that was never anything but joyous, a constant. In a world where the ground was always shifting beneath our feet. Come here. Oh, good boy.
Production funding for Arts Upload has been provided in part by Francis Family Foundation, Hall Family Foundation, the H&R Block Foundation, Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John W. and FEE Spies Memorial Trust, Muriel McBrien Kaufman Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.